Yes, guys, welcome back to my first video for February 2025. I've been thinking about different videos that I'm going to do kind of in this pre-season period. I had thought about doing kind of rumors across the pre-season, but I'm going to go back to these best 23 for the 2025 season, or at least in my opinion. I think we can just cover everything off, everything that's happening in the pre-season, different positional changes and the way that teams look to be setting up and those sorts of things, the way they want to play. We can kind of discuss that throughout the best 23 video anyway with the positional changes and stuff. So I thought I'd do it this way. And it's kind of a nice, easy way just to get back into video making for me. And we're, very excited for this season to kind of kick things off again and really elevate the channel, try to bring different sort of content. Of course, when the season begins, we'll be able to get more into that draft content as well. But I would like to continue this sort of AFL, general AFL kind of content as well. It just sort of fills out the channel a little bit more, and you guys seem to like it. So I'll start off with the sponsor of today's video, which is Video Pro. Now, I've mentioned in a few of these early season videos that Video Pro really helped me out in a bind I was broken into over the Christmas period, lost a lot of my recording stuff to make these videos, and they've sent me this amazing Rodecaster, which is sitting right here. I have the kind of full setup today with the microphone, so audio is back to normal, all of those things, and I couldn't have done it without Video Pro. Now, I was doing all of my electronic sort of shopping with them anyway because they had such good prices, but if you're looking for anything in this kind of podcasting space, your audio devices, microphones, video switches, all of those sorts of things, they have you covered, as well as the particularly I think for the footy fans out there, those home entertainment packages, projectors, things like that, TVs and sound systems, they have all of that, and it's always at the best prices. So jump down into the description below. There is a discount code for all of you there for my subscribers. So jump on that and go and shop at Video Pro. They are the best. So as I was saying, we're going back into these best 23 videos. Now in the, I think before Christmas period, I knocked off Richmond, North Melbourne and West Coast. So we're kind of working our way back up the ladder from bottom to top. So we have got the Adelaide Crows, who are next and are at a really interesting position. I think most people expected them to do a lot better last season. It didn't really happen for them. And I think there is a general expectation amongst the AFL community that they are going to find their feet and bounce back in 2025. I think they have in some areas, really good parts of their list, but there are still some holes and some worries. And I think that's Mathew Nicks' job to be able to fix that up, patch those holes, do the best he can with what he's got to try to give them a push for that top 8, maybe even top 4 if they were to overachieve a little bit. So we'll start here. I have the backline brought up on my screen here at the moment. So you sort of look through, I always go to the tools first just because it's kind of that structurally, I suppose, the most important, that spine. You look there that I've gone with Nick Murray at fullback. I think he's probably, as far as talent goes, the best one-on-one, big-bodied sort of lockdown defender. Now, he's going to be the guy that is taking those, really worrisome forwards for the opposition, your Charlie Curnow's, your Jesse Hogan type players. I think he's going to be the one that just locks down on them. He's not going to fill the stat sheet up much, of course, but you do need those players just to be able to be there as a rock and kind of keep your defense really solid. So I think really for me, it was out of Nick Murray and Jordan Butts for that role. I know Jordan Butts has played more football, but I think on a talent level, you've got to go with Nick Murray here. And I think he offers a little bit more and, might be able to even give you a little bit more on the attacking side than a Butts, who is probably a lower pedigree player, if you will. I've gone with Worrell as the next one. I think he had an awesome year in 2024. I would love him to, as that sort of second tall defender, add a little bit more intercepting to his game. Now, it wasn't really a way that Adelaide sort of played in 2024. They weren't really a team that won the ball back off the opposition, and I think that's maybe an area where this defense can improve a little bit. I think the defense actually did stand up and play pretty well. I think it's the weakest part of the entire Adelaide team. Worrell's a big part of that, and I think what he can do with ball in hand from a kicking point of view, he can sort of open up, opposition offenses there with some of the balls that he can kind of spray into the middle of the ground, and I think that's really important. And it's probably something to note on Adelaide's backline in totality. They sort of have, weirdly, I don't think their smaller defenders are the better kickers, those sort of halfbacks. You look at a team like St Kilda and it's your Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller and your Sinclair that's splitting defences. They probably have it through someone like a Worrell who's actually also operating as a key position defender. So it's sort of interesting how that works. You go to the next kind of, I guess, key position player, that third tall. I've gone with Keane, and the reason that I have gone with Keane is because he does win the ball back off the opposition. He was the best player in their defence last season for doing that, and I think you really need more players that can kind of operate in that space. And we're going to talk about the mediums and the smaller defenders here that can win the ball back off. It's such a big part of the modern game. Max Michelini does do a little bit of intercepting, but I think he does his best work just shutting down those opposition best small forwards. And he'll continue to do that. I don't really see that changing. And he's sort of becoming a real leader in this back six as well. So don't have to talk about Max Michelini. We sort of know what he does. He's a real shutdown player, but does offer a little bit aerial as well. And I just love his competitiveness and his fight. And then we kind of go to the running defenders. Now, this might be the first port of contention here for maybe Crows fans. I've gone with Cumming as a sort of running defender. And the reason that I've done that is because I do like what he does in the air as well. He can sort of come off his man. I think he reads the play better than any of these other Adelaide defenders. And he can operate as a player that can win the ball back off the opposition. I think he has been training more as a wingman in Mathew Nicks' system. And that's sort of what he did at the Giants last season at least. But before that, he was playing as at times even like a third tall. Just he plays so tall for his size. He's around that sort of 184 centimetre mark, I believe. So, but he also, he has that endurance level. He has that run out of defence. He has good speed, good movement. So he can play as a halfback as well. So I've got him penciled in there at the moment. And then I've got Mitch Hinge, who is probably one of the first picked in this defence, to be honest. I think he did a lot of the ball moving last year. I'm hoping that Isaac Cumming can kind of relieve a bit of that load off him so he can do a little bit of defending as well. I don't think Mitch Hinge is a particularly good halfback with ball in hand. Like if you compare him again to the competition's best, like what Nick Dacos was doing, what Harry Sheezer was doing, he's not really to that level with his probably football intelligence and ball use. But I think that's where Isaac Cumming can come in and sort of help them with that. We know that Adelaide are a sort of stoppage-heavy team, so it's not really like these guys have to be the best in the competition, but if they can manufacture a system that sort of works for them, I think it's going to be really important. And a player that's going to be really important to that if they do get that ball movement going off halfback is Wayne Millerer. Well, I've got a little asterisk there. He's on the interchange at the moment here, pending fitness, because he does have a lot of issues with his body. I think if he can get some of that stuff right, then we're going to be looking at a much more dangerous Adelaide halfback line and a team that can really cut the opposition open, because Wayne Millerer, with his talent level, his pace, his versatility, I think he can really help this half-back line / wing position out that Adelaide really do struggle in, and we'll kind of get to in the video. Now, I've got Dan Curtin on the bench there as a defender. Really, Wayne Millerer is the interchange player from defence that I've got here. I've just got Curtin there. I think he's going to be playing more in the midfield and even forward of the ball, but I've just got him there that he can swing back. His primary position and where he was drafted was as a defender. So I think that's, something that we can note. And we move on to the midfield here. So Riley O'Brien, really, Adelaide just do not have many options in the ruck line. So I think Riley O'Brien continues. We know what Riley O'Brien can do. He doesn't give you a lot on transition, but what he does do is he wins a lot of hit-outs and he gives them first use from that midfield. And I talked about that with the way that Adelaide want to play. I think, weirdly, I don't think many Adelaide fans and supporters would see Riley O'Brien as a crucial player, but he's sort of crucial to the way that they play, because I think they want to make themselves a stoppage-dominant team, because their ruckman is a stoppage-dominant ruckman. He gives you first use, hitting out to players like Crouch. So I think Adelaide in the long run will really want to transition away from that game style, because I don't think it's, the modern ruck is doing a lot more around the ground. They're tackling more, or they're, getting out into space and sort of, picking up marks on the outside and delivering the ball inside 50 if you look at someone like a Rowan Marshall. So he's probably got to be moved on, I believe. I just think he's such an old school ruckman. Of all of the rucks in the competition, I think he's kind of doing what rucks were doing 20, 30 years ago. Does give you that first use, so they're going to play around that, and they don't really have another option at this point. Of course, the midfielders that are in there, I've been pretty hot on this, and you'll notice that Matt Crouch is not one of the starting midfielders. I think they need to inject a little bit more pace and a little bit more venom in there. I think they want to be getting out the front of the stoppage more. They don't want to be relying on these sort of in-close, nice little dainty hit-outs from Riley O'Brien to Matt Crouch, who doesn't really gain you any meters. Yeah, he can, open up players into space with some of those crafty handballs that he does. But the modern midfielder takes meters, they have pace, and it's about getting that sort of balance right of defensive and attacking midfielder in there. So I've gone with Jordan Dawson, who is going to progress the ball forward at all costs. He's such a good meters gain midfielder. He's a big body in there. So from a defensive point of view, he can match up on some of those bigger bodied players. And he's just a force in there. You're not really going to beat him out with the strength and the reach that he has. So he's so important. And I think they probably moved him out of that midfield zone a little bit too much in 2024 for mine. Now, Rankin's obviously going to be more of that hybridy player between the forward line. You're probably looking at 50-50 for me. I'd love to see like a 60-40 mix of midfield to forward. See if he can, make the most of that 40% that he has forward to be able to hit the scoreboard, because we know that he's got that in his locker. I don't think you need to rest him forward. I think we saw enough in 2024 that this guy can be an absolute game breaker. And I think he's the most important player in this Adelaide lineup. I've then gone with James Peatling as the defensive-minded mid. But we've already seen from some of the preseason vision of James Peatling, he's got amazing speed and agility, and that's why the Giants picked him up. The Giants team are one of the best recruiting teams out there, and these sorts of players like Cumming and Peatling, Toby Bedford, who they picked up from Melbourne, they seem like periphery players, but when you look at some of the athleticism and the skills that they have in their asset, I think it's the sky's the limit. So whether, maybe Peatling sort of does transition away from that defensive player, but I think he can certainly start, particularly when he's playing alongside Dawson and Rankin, who is so offensive. I think Peatling can be that defensive anchor that they need. Now, sort of confusingly, if you look up at the interchange there in the top right, I've got Saligo. I think he's really the natural one that just comes off the bench here. Gives a little chip out to players like Rankin when he pushes forward, or Jordan Dawson when he needs a spell. We know Jordan Dawson does like to float across the halfback line and take intercepts sort of later in quarters as well. So I think that's something they'll do, similar to what Geelong did with like a Tom Stewart at times, where they sort of, he sort of wheels around out of the stoppage and goes behind the ball. I think Jordan Dawson can do that. Saligo comes in. I think Rochelli's going to play minutes, but I think he's going to be more as a forward, and you'll see him as we come up into the forward line. Dan Curtin, as I mentioned, I think will get midfield minutes, but also play in defence and in the forward line as they try to just sort of, I guess, like elevate his development a little bit throughout this season. And I think the other major midfield player, and one that could really take the most of all of these players on the interchange, is Sid Draper. We know what he can do. And if you start to look at this midfield now, you've got players like Rankin, you've got Peatling, you've got Dawson, and then you've got the quality of Sid Draper coming off the bench. I don't know if teams are going to be able to live with that movement inside the centre circle at times, and they're going to be so dangerous around stoppages, particularly with what they also have forward of the ball. So without sort of going too far ahead, I think, you look at that Adelaide defence, it's a little bit more on the lower end side compared to from the midfield forward. Now, the wings are, I think, a little bit problematic for Adelaide. Now, it's not really on these players that I'm saying it's a problem, but again, ball movement's such an important part. We saw what Sydney did throughout the 2024 season. They were able to win so many games with, players like Goulden sort of just outrunning their opponents and then delivering those darts inside forward 50. I don't think Adelaide have that player. Now, I've gone with Nankervis there, you'll see on the right, and that's sort of the Isaac Cumming choice. I think you've either got Cumming or Nankervis. One plays behind the ball, one plays forward of the ball. I think Nankervis, with his endurance, with his bit of bite, bit of pace, and athleticism aerially, I think he can do this role. And I think it's what Cumming can do for you behind the ball. You go with Nankervis a little bit higher. Now, is Nankervis like an amazing kick of the footy? Probably not, but I'm just not sure if Adelaide at this point have that player, and it's something that they might have to look at with recruiting throughout the year, even to the draft at the end of the year. And I've gone with Scholl. I think you've got to kind of reward the performances that he put up in the 2024 season are really good. So I'm giving him that other wing spot. I think he's he's not an outstanding player, but he's a player that can fulfill that role. I mean, teams have won premierships and they've competed in finals with, worse players than Scholl for sure. So I think he gets in there and, he's got that run to be able to get you up the field. We'll move into that forward line. So I'll start with the talls again. So Tex and Thilthorpe. I think what Thilthorpe can do, I can't pronounce that very well, Thilthorpe. what he's going to be able to do, I think, is massive. Like what we saw at the end, he came back in, he looks so much stronger and more physically imposing. I think he's going to be able to take big contested marks. And it gives you such an outlet if you've got that player. The Giants with Hogan last season, how many contested marks, how many marks inside 50 he was able to generate. If Thilthorpe can do that, and even I think with the players that Adelaide have at ground level, he's not even going to have to mark the football, and that's not going to be relied upon if he can just make contests. We know that he's got pretty good endurance as well, so he's going to be able to get up the ground, make those contests, something similar to what like a Harry Mackay does. Charlie Curnow does it as well with his athleticism. So Thilthorpe's the key here. If he can have a 50 plus, 60 plus goal season, Adelaide are going to be right in the mix. Tex just has to do what Tex does. He's going to play deeper. He's going to play closer to goal. Be that more bear in the cage sort of guy that just has contests, and with his nous and with his sort of experience, I think he's going to still be a pretty good player. Dropped off a little bit in 24, but what he did in 23 was great. He's not so old that he can't come back from that. Darcy Fogarty there, really important as that third foil sort of type, and I think he's going to have to roam as well. Of course, he's going to have to be closer to goal and he's going to have to kick a lot of goals. But you can't tell me with Fogarty, Thilthorpe and Tex that that's not a really, really dangerous forward line from a key position point of view, and something that, a team that can kick enough goals. You look at my smalls, I think Keys and Alex Neil-Bullen, that's an amazing sort of high half forward mix that you've got there. Those guys have so much run in them, so much versatility, and they're also dangerous close to goal. Keys does it more like less from sort of a nous point of view, but he just has so much sort of physicality, so much run in him that he just sort of outworks his opponent. Alex Neil-Bullen, somewhat the same. I just think he plays that position so well, drops into really important spaces and then kicks good balls inside forward 50, which will be important with those tools. And then I've gone with Rochelle closer to goal in this setup. Now, I think Rochelle will come into the midfield as well and play minutes in there, but I think when he is in the forward line, you've got to play him closer to goal because of his creativity and because of his, ruthlessness in front of goal. I think he's probably the most sharp, has the best movement of those players to play in front of the goals and kick those big goals. And he has to become that player. I know we haven't really seen it, but he has to become that really clinical, dangerous player that, the Toby Green essentially in front of the ball. So I'm loving that mix. I think that's a great forward line. I've then gone with Berry as that sort of extra. Probably gives you enough versatility to be able to go up into the midfield if you need it as well. So I like this mix. I like what they've got in the midfield. It's probably the wings and the defence that is worrying me the most. We'll jump over just quickly to go through the interchange players. So Millera, who's that sort of extra defensive line player. Draper through the midfield as well as Saligo. Then Curtin, who's sort of more versatile. You're getting a tall, can be a key position player, but also can be a running player. And then I've gone with Berry. Now, if you look down at the emergencies, Butts is right there and he's probably going to play football through injury and that sort of thing. Crouch hasn't made the starting team. And I've kind of talked about this a lot even through last season. I just don't think he offers enough. Like, he's not a defensively minded midfield player. Yes, he gets clearances. Yes, he gets first hands on the ball, but a lot of that is also the impact of Riley O'Brien that I've talked about. And I just think you can't have too many midfielders running through there that are essentially no meters gained and they're just like creative handballers, basically. Rory Laird goes into that as well. I haven't even got him on the sheet here, but I just don't think Rory Laird makes the team. I think you've got to start putting games into some of these younger players who have more upside that can pretty much elevate the team to be a finals team or even be a top four side, a premiership side. Close, and I think players that will play games here. You've got Dowling, you've got Taylor. They did a lot, and they'll, again, injuries going to happen, so they're going to come into the side. Some of the players that I've talked about here have even picked up injuries in the preseason, so it's going to be touch and go, and these guys are going to come in. Chase Jones on a wing. Do you really want that? I don't. I don't really rate what he does. I don't think he's a great kick. He just runs around, just does cardio. Pedler, close, and probably it's out of Berry and Pedler for that sort of, other high half forward spot. Murphy, I'm not a big fan of, and Oscar Ryan, I am a fan of. You probably just can't get him into that, as a running defender. You can't get him in over a Cumming, Nankervis, who I spoke about on the wing, and also Hinge. So again, injury will come up, and I think these guys will get opportunity, but that's the side I've generally gone with. So I think I've gone with a little bit more of an aggressive, a little bit more of a freewheeling Adelaide here compared to, I think, how they've been in the past, which is a little bit on the conservative side. Now, I think what they really do have to do here, particularly from a midfield perspective, is start to make those clearances that they're getting a little bit more dangerous. Now, I spoke about statistically, I'm not going to go to the stats, I'll just sort of mention it, that Riley O'Brien to Matt Crouch is a huge combination of ruckman to midfielder, and they get that working, but they just don't convert it into clearances enough. And that's why I've gone with more of your Dawsons, your Rankins, your Peatlings. I just think those guys are going to make those the weapon that you have in Riley O'Brien from a stoppage situation. I just think you're going to get more bang for your buck and a higher strike rate as far as being able to turn the first hands on the ball into a clearance, but also getting it forward and turning it into scores, which is actually the most important. And that's an area that statistically Adelaide just don't really stack up as far as, scores per inside 50, scores per clearance and those sorts of things. So that's really the area for them to work on, as well as I think getting back to that 2023 brand, which was a bit more aggressive off the half-back line as well. And I think that'll come when you've got players like Isaac coming back there. If they can turn Dan Curtin into this sort of bigger-bodied midfielder that can float back, then you get more flexibility with Jordan Dawson as well as that sort of intercept defender and guy that can really pierce open opposition defences. So that's what it's all about for Adelaide in 2025. I think the sky is the limit. I think they're in that group of teams where it can kind of go both ways, which is what we saw in 2024. There's certainly holes in the team as far as the wings and the defense as well, but this is where it comes down to Mathew Nicks and what he can do. The selection is really important, but also the game plan is going to be really important in 2025. Thank you guys for watching. Once again, I'd like to thank Video Pro. Go and check out some of their deals and use the discount code below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.